Welcome to Enlighten Ed, a podcast for educators and parent educators. It is a space where we can learn together, be enlightened together, share, and grow. I am Dr. Raju Filippo, the CEO of Attest Education, a program and school redesign organization. We infuse inquiry, STEM, personalized learning approaches with equity and innovation. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Inquiry Classroom. I have with me two of my esteemed colleagues who will be describing how inquiry is alive in their classroom. So I'll turn to them now so they can introduce themselves in whatever order you guys want.
Guess I'll start. I'm Norm Rousseau. I work at Medford Vo-Tech High School, Medford High School. I teach a Chapter 74 biotechnology program.
My name is Retha Reynolds. I teach for Boston Public School in a 5th grade inclusion classroom.
Thank you, Retha. Thank you, Norm, for being with us. So I have my dandy notes with me. I'll be asking a few questions. Today, like all of our episodes, we really explore one or two topics around the Inquiry Classroom. And today we really want to understand, how do teachers really make this happen? And what are some of the precursor, right? The pre-work we need to do to create that Inquiry Classroom. So my first question for you is for you to describe as vividly as you possibly can what an Inquiry Classroom really looks like. And we're talking two different grade levels here, right? Someone at the elementary school level and someone at the high school level, especially a Vo-Tech classroom. So in any order, it doesn't matter.
Want to start?
Okay, I will. So, when I think about my classroom, I'm so overwhelmed and so excited about what I'm seeing. This didn't happen overnight. This has been in the process for maybe 5-6 years when I first was introduced to this type of classroom. If you walk into my room, you would see flex seating. Most of the kids are not sitting. We don't have regular desks. We have tables, but most of the kids don't sit at the table. They're comfortable in the work that they're doing. And so we have a collaboration station where kids go to when they're working on projects and they want to talk about it. They can just go to that area. Every part of the room, kids are sitting in collaborative groups discussing the work. I want to say that this didn't happen, like I say, overnight. It took a long time to get to this point. But I'm seeing and feeling what I believe that should happen in these type of classrooms. Like, it's less teacher talking. I was trained on the style of teaching, I do, we do, you do. And basically telling the kids what to say. You give a question, and we believe that we had some higher order questions that we always have for students we start out with. You're going through this process of you modeling and you showing them. You're basically setting this format for kids to feel like they have to be in this certain bubble almost. They have to do exactly what you showed them to do. Now we are starting out with kids are working and they'll work on maybe a question or a topic and they are really, they think about it themselves first and then they go and they're working with their peers, but the teacher is just walking around like as a facilitator to see how you can help, how you can support students in what they're doing, which is totally different from what I learned in school when I went to college years ago and what I learned throughout my career as a teacher. Like 22 years, I saw the same thing, but this type of teaching, like you see and you hear more student voice. Students are talking. Students are drawing things. They are building things. They are making suggestions with each other. It's just amazing at this level. And my classroom is an inclusion classroom where we have kids on IEPs, we have ESL students. It's just like a huge, diverse classroom with 20 kids, but be able to walk in my classroom and tell, this is the IEP student, or this is the ESL student. These students are all, it's just, I've seen nothing like it. They're all engaged. It's amazing. I could go on and talk forever, but I feel my colleague want to share something and describe his classroom. But I would open, I'm going to close with this on this question. I would open my classroom up now to the world because I'm so proud of what I'm seeing and hearing from the students and less from myself.
So it sounded like what you were saying is that it's made, you can't necessarily distinguish the kids on IEPs from, because they're fully integrated.
That's right.
And
You can't.
That's how I try to do it too.
Yep, you cannot. And I'm loving it because they have a voice now. They're talking. Before these kids, and you know that they'll sit back and they're quiet and they won't talk or they won't engage. They won't get involved in the work. But doing the work differently, it's more student-centered. It's more about, like, everybody brings their culture into the classroom. And when they say they bring their culture into the classroom, when kids are talking, when they're having a discussion, they're bringing in their prior knowledge about what they know about a topic. And that's where different cultures come in, because kids are sharing things that happen in their community. It's just a different, I don't think I could go back to ever teaching the way I taught again. So it's different.
I do want to remind anyone who's watching that oftentimes with Attest Education, we use the word inquiry-based learning because we want to focus on the sustained inquiry part of project-based learning. And there are times where you are in a school in which you don't necessarily have tasks that are that might fit into the traditional definition of project-based learning, but there are really ways in which we could flip certain parts of what we give students and how we execute lessons so that it becomes more of an inquiry process as opposed to the traditional way of teaching. And so that's one of the reasons why we use inquiry-based learning. We focus on inquiry a lot. I'm going to turn to Norm because we're having a conversation. So Norm, same question to you. Vividly describe your classroom and this idea of inquiry. How is inquiry alive in your classroom?
So I work in what's known as CTE, or Career Technical Education. And in this kind of a classroom, you're trying to model the workplace as much as possible, because you want to provide students an authentic work experience of what it's like to work in a particular field. So first of all, my classroom is located in the science wing, which is a set apart from sort of like the vocational wing of the school. And that's because the science rooms were new. They were recently modified. So I had that going for me. I had a new classroom. First thing they see is a big, giant 400-gallon, and those are powered by grow lights that were built by the robotics and engineering students. So right away, they're like, oh, what's this going on in the classroom here? And my room is stuffed with all kinds of equipment that you would find in a biotech lab. That's because I want to make it feel like they're walking right into a biotech startup. I don't just teach skills, I also teach my students about what it means to be a professional. How do you conduct yourself in a mature and responsible manner, because that's what's expected of you when you're in the workplace. So my room is stuffed with equipment, and I think that the way I try to run our projects is I'm like a supervisor, and my students are like employees that I supervise, but I know that my success depends upon their success. So everything is set up to help to support them, to make sure they understand what they're doing, what they need to do. Everyone has a clear role to play. And the projects that they do, I try to make as authentic to an actual project they would be doing at work. One recent example is I was teaching my students how to do something called tissue culture, where they have to grow animal cells, and they have to do it without contaminating the cells. They have to use perfect aseptic technique. And not just growing cells, but I had them, be able to culture the cells so that we could do chemical tests on them. And because I explained in a lab, you would have to test several drug compounds on these cells. So you have to plate them in these several different like multi-well plates, and there's all these different things you have to do to make sure you're putting in the right amount of cells. I taught them how to use an electronic notebook, which I did because some of my students are left-handed, and it's excruciating to read their writing, but also for them to write and smudge ink on their left hand. So I said, let's switch to electronic notebooks. Now everyone loves it because it's so much easier to work with, and it's much easier for them to share with others. They can share with me electronically. They can share it with their partners. So, in short, every project we do is something that I've learned from industry, and I try to apply it to the classroom so my students get that experience too.
So I have a follow-up questions for you guys in terms of when someone, a student, a young person first walks into your classroom, right? Particularly you, Norm, since you just described the classroom for us, a ninth grader, maybe coming from a very traditional setting, what is that experience like let's say the first month? Like, how do you get them used to this idea that you are the supervisor and not necessarily this person is telling them exactly what to think and do?
So for a ninth grader in my classroom, ninth graders in many vocational technical schools do what's called exploratory, where they spend some time in each of the vocational shops. And the idea is to allow each student a chance to experience each sort of career area and then pick for themselves what they think is the best fit. And they can choose to study that further. So with my ninth graders, it's very short. Each group is only in my classroom for like a week. And it might be a group of 10 students. So right away, I sort of have everyone sit around. I have desks that I can, on wheels, I can configure the classroom any way I like. So we sort of sit together around this central table. That's our workspace. But it's also a chance for them to look at each other and look at me. And right away, it's sort of like we're like clustered like a team. And I say, I introduce the shop. Let's tour the lab together. Explain that, show them the safety features. And first of all, we have to be safe. We have to be safe in a practical sense, and also we're going to be safe with each other. So safety is sort of embedded in from day one. Then we start to work on some very simple projects together that are designed to give the students a taste of what it's like to work in a lab. And I'll have the students try to work together. They might work in pairs where they have to do the steps together to complete the project. I ask for volunteers to come out and help me mix this together. Can you help me get that for me? At the end, we all work together to clean up the lab, and because why should I do all the work? They're the ones that make the mess. They should clean it up, and they do. And usually it works really well. So right away, I try to get them to think we're a team and we work together, and frankly, I think that's what industry wants. They want team players because they can cooperate better.
I have the same question for you, Rita. I don't know if the fourth graders coming in have experienced a project-based learning or an inquiry-based learning environment, but for you, your fresh fifth graders coming in, how do you get them acclimated to this culture, to this environment, this type of learning that you want to happen?
The first thing I feel like the first thing I do, which is really important, is to get to know my students. It's so important to build relationships with them and to know who they are, where they're coming from, what they do outside of school, what are their interests. So I do like a lot of projects where kids they're sharing their identities, like what are identities we see, what are the identities that you have or that you claim that we can't see. Then I have students work with each other a lot, and they sort of interview each other and share something about themselves, and then they have to draw the person that they met or the student that they saw, and we kind of compare things and say, okay, well, did we really get to know each other? I do a lot of projects where I include families in the very beginning, because I want to know, like, what's life like outside of the classroom? What are certain projects you may not want to touch on, depending on where the children are coming from. So to me, like, the very first few weeks of school, you're working really hard to get to know those kids, to build community, to learn who they are. I don't focus a lot on likability, like saying, well, this student has an IEP, so I need to do this or that. I see them as individuals and try and get to know, like, what is it. I do watch for things that students may need, but at the same time, I want to know them, and I need them to be able to trust me, to have an environment where they feel safe enough to open up or safe enough to share their thinking, because you can put students in groups all you want, but if they don't feel comfortable, you'll see that some students will sit, won't say nothing. You'll see you have this group of students who will take the lead and they do all the work. And so in trying to prevent that, when you're doing projects or when you're setting the environment up so that you can be able to do these projects successfully, you need to be able to make sure that everybody understands that you are included and you are a part of this environment. So that's really, to me, the first. Because they're younger, you have to build that culture that they know, inclusive culture, that you are a part of this community.